there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me, and if you watched us last Tuesday here on CBS Sports Network, you might remember that we were wondering out loud when Cooper Flagg would actually become college basketball's biggest story. Then a few hours later, it happened. Viral dunk against Pitt, and then on Saturday against Notre Dame, Cooper Flagg set an ACC record for freshmen with 42 points in a victory over the Irish. Norlander, let's start here. The Cooper Flagg train, it has hit full speed. Will it get slowed down, or is Cooper Flagg going to continue to shine and eventually become the youngest Wooden Award winner in the history of college basketball?
Well, has it hit full speed? I feel like the train can even get faster, GP. What say you? I feel like this is a new level of acceleration and momentum, but halfway through the season, I'm not convinced this won't be a bigger story. He'll be a better player. I know you're kind of teeing me up and setting me up for that question, but as you were saying it, I do wonder if this gets even bigger and better for Cooper Flagg. And for Duke, what do you think? Do you think right now, and they got a game against Duke has a game Tuesday night against Miami, which is 4-12. Look, checking on Miami, one win since the middle of November. So there's a real chance that if Cooper Flagg wants to go for 30 plus again on Tuesday night, he's going to do it. But do you think that, would you put it more likely than not that it gets even bigger and better than what it's been? Or, this is completely understandable, by the way, he's coming off the best game of his college career. Like, well, Cooper Flagg, statistically, do you think he'll have a better game than what he did against Notre Dame when he set the ACC record for most points by a freshman in a game, scored more points by any Duke player since J.J. Redick in 2006? If you think that's the high watermark, I think that's reasonable, but I don't put it out the realm of possibility that he's still got something even better in him.
I wouldn't rule anything out, but it is quite literally the high mark among every freshman who's ever played basketball in the ACC, at least in terms of points per game. The 42 points on 14 shots, according to our colleague Cal Boone, that is the third most points ever scored on 14 or fewer shots in the history of the sport. So statistically speaking, that might be the best individual performance. And so when I say the Cooper Flagg train has hit full speed, that's what I mean. But obviously, when you get college football's national championship game behind us, the NFL playoffs behind us, the Super Bowl obviously behind us, then there's just more attention on our sport. You know how it is. Every year in November, December, you get asked to go on radio stations in certain markets. And then once the Super Bowl's over, it's every market in America. So there will be more attention on Cooper Flagg when football is in our rearview mirror. But in terms of he's arrived, is the hype real? Is this guy actually a National Player of the Year candidate? All of that stuff has now arrived. He's not only the favorite now to win the Wooden Award, he is a pretty sizable favorite.
Sizable favorite, which is interesting because we talked on our Sunday pod that we both believe that Flagg has taken the lead on Johni Broome, but that's in my opinion right now, midway through the season, it's a half step, if you will. And he didn't need to come. This wasn't like the Olympics and the 100-meter dash over last summer when Noah Lyles absolutely burst forward in the final 40 meters to overtake that. Flagg was a step or two behind Broome through the first 6 weeks of the season, and then had been pretty close over the past 2 weeks. And now, as a nature of, and we'll get to Broome here in a little bit, but the nature of Broome's injury combined with Flagg just going, supernova against Notre Dame, he's got the lead. And so, yeah, he's got a chance to be the youngest, Naismith Award, Wooden Award, National Player of the Year honoree in the history of men's Division I college basketball. And wouldn't that be something? I was thinking about this earlier today when I was getting a little workout in. It is pretty cool to see how this has come about, though. There was so much attached to Cooper Flagg heading into this season because you and I were both there in the gyms at the Peach Jam a couple years back when, we're unaccustomed to seeing a team stroll in and play on the Nike EYBL circuit. And what do they got? They got white jerseys on with the big block lettering Maine across the chest. That does not happen at the premier grassroots tournament in the entire sport. And that was only happening because they had this guy named Cooper Flagg who going in, and this is now a couple years ago, had a lot of intrigue to him. And then in those events and other ones, but those specifically, when you've got the most media attention there and the highest influx of the biggest coaches, most consistently constantly getting eyes on him. He really started to emerge as a special kind of prospect. Duke was the longtime leader, and lo and behold, he winds up going to Duke. And then all that leads into this season. And, he has the workouts and the scrimmages with the United States national men's basketball team leading into the Olympics. He's got that, those couple of clips that were shared widely on social media and got some television recognition in the middle of summer. And here we are. And he has not been a letdown whatsoever. He had a couple of plays that he would like to take back from early in the season in Duke's 2 losses, but those are expected bumps and growing pains. And the big picture, they're minor. Like, they might mean something to his overall development and what he can learn from him, but they don't mean anything to his reputation, how we view him now. And it would have been completely reasonable if Cooper Flagg, if we got to the midway point of this season, GP, and Cooper Flagg was merely one of the 3 or 4 best freshmen, and that was an interesting discussion. He was on the outskirts of the All-American conversation, and Duke was a pretty good team, but with some flaws. That's not what this is. Cooper Flagg is the MVP, the do-it-all player. I'm going to have something on Wednesday. This is a tease. I'm not going to spoil this nugget on the Tuesday show because I want people to read it, but I've got a factoid about Cooper Flagg and what he is doing statistically right now for Duke, and how we've only seen it happen with one other player in the past 40 years. It's been amazing to see how impactful he has been. And I don't know if he'll have statistically a better game than what he had against Notre Dame. I think it's likely, or maybe not likely, but I think it's very possible he'll get a triple-double. He didn't get that against Notre Dame, but I still think that there's so much room to grow, and to see him leading this with some other freshmen next to him, and Duke be, I think at this point fairly rated as a top 3 team, is a pretty cool story. Because as you and I both know, we often see highly acclaimed freshmen step into varying type of spots, not just even talking Rutgers and that, but I'm talking in years past, blue bloods otherwise, where they don't just necessarily live up to the expectation. Flagg, I would argue, has almost exceeded it, and that's a big statement because the expectations were as high as we've had for any freshman coming into the sport in a decade or more.
I would argue he's exceeded all expectations. I mean, I voted him preseason National Player of the Year, but I was in the minority. At CBS Sports, the preseason National Player of the Year was Mark Sears. Right now, the favorite to be National Player of the Year is Cooper Flagg. That suggests he has exceeded most people's expectations. To put some numbers on it, he's averaging 19.1 points, 8.3 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.6 steals, 1.3 blocks per game. He's leading Duke in every one of those categories. When you go out and secure a recruiting class like this, if you could just pull Jon Scheyer aside and say, okay, dream scenario, how does this unfold? You would say, well, I hope that the freshmen don't get overwhelmed by older, more physical, experienced teams. I hope Cooper Flagg is the best player, not just on our team, but in the country. And I hope we emerge as the best team in the country. I know on paper we're the most talented, but that doesn't always guarantee anything. I hope that we emerge not only as the most talented team with the most NBA draft picks, but as the best college basketball team in the country. And as we sit here on January 14th, every bit of that is true. Cooper Flagg is the best player at Duke. He is arguably the best player in the country, evidence being that he's leading the National Player of the Year race in the betting markets. Also in the betting markets, I know Auburn is ranked number 1 in the AP poll. Auburn is ranked number 1 in my top 25 and 1. Duke is actually the favorite in the betting markets to win the national championship. So we could have some real narrative busting stuff happening right now in Durham. As the game has changed and the transfer portal has become more prominent, and everybody has waivers to play immediately, and NIL deals are moving players around, there's been a prevailing thought in the sport that you don't need to be too reliant on freshmen, that freshmen don't need to be your best players anymore. Why would you want to build everything around a 17-year-old who won't turn 18 till just before Christmas when you can build it around a 23 or a 24 or 25-year-old? And yet here they are at Duke. Their best player just turned 18. They're starting 3 freshmen. They're the favorite to win the national championship, and they've got the favorite to win National Player of the Year. This is unfolding exactly the way you would have envisioned it if you were being as positive as possible as a Duke fan in the preseason.
Yeah, for sure. Now, just because they're the favorite, for our viewers and listeners, I wouldn't, like, if if we're gonna get some bracket stuff later on the show here, I wouldn't pick Duke to win the national championship. It's understandable why they're the favorite because of Flagg and how good he is, and also it's Duke. You're going to get more people that are going to want it, that are going to tend to pick Duke to win the national championship. So that stuff factors in as well. I do want to see this being done in a bracket when you have to win 6 games in a row, and we only have but 2 teams that have really done this and pulled this off, and that was Kentucky in 2012, and then Duke with no shortage of veteran impact players as well. But in 2015, Duke was certainly freshman laden, and it was even Grayson Allen emerging in that Final Four to be an impact player there. So I do want to see that happen, but even aside of what the tournament can provide and the opportunities and the pitfalls there, Duke is trending toward number 1 seed land. It would be a 1 seed right now, and it doesn't seem to have much competition in the ACC. I think a loss or 2 is probably going to happen. That's completely reasonable. But Jon Scheyer in year 3 has managed to handle this job extremely well. We said it in the past couple of seasons. He passed the test in years 1 and 2. Didn't quite get to where they wanted to go, but certainly was far from a failure. And now in year 3, we just check in. All right, how's Duke after Coach K retired? Where are they at? Well, they've got the best freshman in the country, maybe the best player in the country. They're a factor nationally. They're super fun to watch. They remain relevant. They remain ultra talented. That is a very hard job. And yeah, there's plenty of season to go here, but to this point, he's handled it with aplomb.
Yeah, and Duke obviously playing in an ACC that isn't going to present too many challenges. That is among the reasons, according to KenPom right now, Duke is expected to be a favorite in every remaining regular season game, barring a surprise. And by surprise, I mean injury. Duke probably will not be an underdog again this season until some point in the NCAA tournament. And depending on if they keep strong computer numbers, maybe never again.
GP, real quick, for fun, going into tonight, Flagg at 42, home against the bad Miami team. I'm going to say over-under for Flagg at, I'll say 27.5, which is a crazy high number, but Miami's terrible, and he might be on a hot streak. You're going to go over or under? You mentioned his averages earlier, just as a reminder to our live audience. He's averaging 19.1, so this is way over, but I'm going to say 27.5. Over or under?
I mean, just the sensible thing would say under. That's a massive number. Plus, you got to account for the idea that Duke might be up 20, with 15 minutes to go, and he could sit out, what amounts to garbage time. So I would take the under, but I'm going to root for the over, because isn't that fun? I'm going to root for the over.
It would be fun. I will also go under, but I'm kind of pumping the brakes on it, but I will also go under 27.5.
All right. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to the number 1 team in the nation, according to the AP poll. It's the Auburn Tigers. They got 60 of a possible 62 first-place votes in Monday's AP poll, but their best player, Johni Broome, is hurt. Odd situation. We'll discuss it next. This is the Eye on College Basketball podcast on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball podcast here on CBS Sports Network. Auburn Tigers got 60 of a possible 62 first-place votes in Monday's Associated Press AP poll. That means they are ranked number 1, but their best player, and one of the best players in the country, Johni Broome, is hurt. It's a significant ankle sprain suffered over the weekend. No surgery required, but he's going to at least miss 2 games, and most people seem to think even more to that. The Tigers will be back on the court tonight, hosting Mississippi State. So it's a top 15 matchup. Auburn is favored, but not nearly by as much as they would be if Johni Broome was injured. Norlander, are the Tigers going to be number 1 in the AP poll this time next week? Can they survive a week? Mississippi State at home, and then this weekend at Georgia.
I think they can. Good question, GP, because I think it's very possible Auburn could get past Mississippi State here on Tuesday night. That's a really fun matchup. Really, I mean, so many of these matchups in the SEC are must see, and that's yet another one. We just get these practically every night the SEC is in play. You're going to have must see matchups. And then at Georgia, which go ahead and check Georgia's schedule. It's ridiculous for the next 5 games. Georgia popped into the AP rankings this week for the first time since 2011. And Mike White's program, though I'm not opposed to being wrong here. It seems like they might be a quick pop in, pop out, because they've got a lot on their schedule, including Auburn this weekend. You know what? Broome's been tremendous, and he's the centerpiece. He's been the best or second best player in the sport so far this season. GP, I say Auburn gets it done. I say they handle business at home against Mississippi State, and then they go on the road and they're able to beat Georgia on Saturday. I'll say they get that done. I talked with the source on Sunday, and they told me he'll be out at least 2 games. There is no rush for him coming back. So Tennessee next Saturday, January 25th, we'll see if he's available to play in that game. I mean, that's a just dynamite matchup, but you're not going to bring him back if he's not, if not 100%, very, very close to it. So we wait and see on Broome, which is a bummer. Any injury at all is a bummer, but for Auburn, for the SEC, for college basketball, for one of the more high profile players in the sport, to lose him here is no good. He's averaging 17.9 points, 10.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and 2.7 blocks. And as we've mentioned earlier in the season, those numbers would actually be even better if he did not have to leave 2 games due to injury. He had a shoulder scare against Georgia State in mid-December, didn't wind up missing the next game at all, but the averages get dipped down there, so his numbers would be even better had he not suffered injuries. I'll say they get it done. Auburn's been that good, but it won't be easy. I'd be surprised. I'll say this, GP. I'd be surprised if they go 0-2. Home against Mississippi State, at Georgia, both very tough games, both losable games, but with how the Tigers have comported themselves this season, I don't think they're going 0-2 in the next 2 minimally without Broome.
I know you said a source told you they're not going to rush him back. I wish a source would tell you the opposite of that. Wouldn't that be fun to report?
That would be.
The Auburn program said they're going to rush him back.
I want a source to go on the record about that. I want a source to go on the record about, listen, I can't really call this successful surgery right now. Like, I'm not convinced. Let's wait and see on this. Every single surgery is always successful. So I completely agree with you on that. We're not going to rush him back. Although sometimes we do see teams and players do wind up rushing players back, but we don't get that admission in the days following an injury. So sometime in the future, I'll try and correct that and make it a first in the history of sports reporting.
I wish you could go on CBS Sports HQ and say, I talked to a source from Auburn. They said as soon as he's on one crutch, Johni Broome will be back on the court, hobbled or otherwise. They're rushing him back.
We're gonna bring him out. We're gonna protest the NCAA rules, and if he can be out there with one of those scooters, we're gonna have Johni Broome out there with a scooter. We're gonna make that happen.
Johni Broome on a scooter against Alabama. That's the game of the weekend. We're rushing him back. No, obviously they're not going to rush him back. And if they don't rush him back, or even if they just bring him back when he's ready to play, I'm not a doctor. Sometimes I pretend to be one. I'm not. But like, I am somebody who covers basketball, and I am somebody who, lives in a place where the NBA franchise has had more games missed by players for injury this season than any team in the NBA. And it was also true last season. So I know a thing or two about sprained ankles. And I'm just telling you, if this were in the NBA, if this happened in the NBA, they would come out the next day and say he's out a month minimum. They would just say he's out. Like, if that happens to you in the NBA, you're not playing for a long time, with few exceptions. So I hope it's only 2 games. I hope it's only a week. Again, I'm not a doctor. Everybody's body responds differently. All of the disclaimers, right? I'd be surprised if he only misses 2 games. Will you be surprised if he only misses 2 games?
I think it's more likely than not he misses at least 3 games. By the way, from what you're laying out with the Grizzlies here, maybe you do need to be the doctor. If this is continually being an issue, they might need to look into making a staff change there. If they keep having these year-over-year injury issues, I'm not going to go on national television and criticize my training staff, Norlander. Okay.
But I get your point. I hear what you're saying. I understand. Hey, you would fit right in with some Grizzlies fans.
Okay.
you jump on a Grizzlies message board, you'll fit right in. How big of a difference this makes? For what it's worth, KenPom had Auburn as a 13-point favorite tonight against Mississippi State at home. The actual line in the betting markets is down to 7.5. So that's a difference of 5.5 points. So that's how much Johni Broome matters to Las Vegas. It's a 5.5 point difference to them. I've seen other numbers, that vary slightly, but 5.5 is what Vegas said relative to the KenPom number. That's one way to look at it. The other way is, even without their best player, Auburn is a 7.5 point favorite over a top 15 team tonight. That suggests that maybe Matt Painter was closer to right than wrong earlier this season, the Purdue coach, when he said Auburn is so talented, so deep, that you could take their bench and make a top 25 team. We sort of wondered and laughed whether that was really true. These point spreads suggest that it might be true, because they just lost a National Player of the Year candidate, their best player, leading scorer, and rebounder, and they're still a sizable favorite over a top 15 team. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, good recall on and callback to Painter's quote there, because that'll get tested to a certain extent with no Broome. Mississippi State, a reputation for being a stout defensive team. It's merely just been good so far this season, and now it's got a big challenge having to play in Neville Arena and going up against an Auburn team that will be charged up. And even like Dylan Cardwell, who's the second big on Auburn, and has become really good friends with Johni Broome. We detailed that on CBSSports.com earlier this season and talked about it on the show back in November, when Cardwell was really forthcoming and honest about how initially he did not even accept Broome as a teammate because he thought that Broome was, going to take some of his minutes. And lo and behold, Broome did, who, after he transferred from Morehead State, where he was a mid-major stud, and they went through a lot of growth together, and they've become really, really close friends. It's a really awesome story. Well, now Cardwell, who's been a big factor on this team anyway, has a chance to really be a guy to step up and be an even bigger force there. It won't just be him, obviously, but he's going to be a key factor there. If you're curious on who becomes the next guy up, Chaney Johnson, I was told, is going to be the guy that will move into the fifth starting spot, which makes sense. He got the most minutes of any non-starter to this point in the season, and it's a good matchup. Mississippi State coming off of what was quite a thriller at home, a 95-90 loss over the weekend to Kentucky, where Kentucky hit 16 out of 32 three-point attempts. Kentucky's a really good offensive team, but in most games, if it shoots at least 33s, it's not making 50% of them. So it got hot especially in a road environment there. So interested to see how Jan's team responds. Players to know in this game: Josh Hubbard, a fun little 5'11", who's really, again, the dude ain't 5'11". Who cares what he's listed at? He's a dynamo. He's diminutive, and he's a lot of fun. He's a good 3-point shooter. Between him and Cameron Matthews, those two guards, how successful they are against Auburn, I think will be key. And yeah, I just want to see how the Tigers respond without their leader, their most important player in the tune-up for at least 2 games, if not 3 or more, without Johni Broome.
Just to reiterate, Auburn got Mississippi State at home tonight. Then it's at Georgia this weekend. If Johni Broome only misses 2 games, it might be a byproduct of the fact that it's beneficial. Next week is the week that Auburn doesn't have a midweek game. So it's Mississippi State tonight, at Georgia on Saturday, and then no more games until the following Saturday, January 25th, against Tennessee. So that's at least one less game that Auburn would otherwise have to play. Perhaps that's one less game that Johni Broome will have to miss. Right now, sidelined, significant ankle sprain, guaranteed to miss 2 games. That's the reporting. We'll see after that. Moving on, only one interesting game in the sport on Monday night, really. It was UCLA at Rutgers. Nice win for the Scarlet Knights and those 2 5-star freshmen. Another rough loss for UCLA. That's 4 in a row. We'll dive into the Bruins issues next. This is the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. There was one interesting game on Monday night in college basketball. UCLA at Rutgers. Nice win for the Scarlet Knights. Another rough loss for UCLA. Final score: Rutgers 75, UCLA 68. That's 4 straight losses for the Bruins. They were 15th in the AP poll, Norlander, 2 weeks ago. Now they're 11-6. They've lost 5 of their past 6, and 4 of those 5 losses are to unranked teams. You saw UCLA in person last week. What's wrong with Mick Cronin's Bruins?
They have drastically dropped off as a defensive unit. They are not turning teams over the way they once were. I think, as we mentioned on the weekend show, the issues at home with the Los Angeles wildfires impacting people in that entire area, at that university, in the athletic department, within that men's basketball program. I think those are also playing understandable factors as well. But man, oh man. And it's also been a function of the scheduling, by the way, and I'll have more on this in the court report on Wednesday on your CBS Sports app or at cbssports.com. But I did do the math, and over a 10-day span, UCLA wound up traveling. If you account for air mileage, they had to ride the bus from Maryland up to Jersey, to and from the airport, all that stuff. They logged more than 7,700 miles and 20 or so hours of travel in a 10-day span to play 4 games in the middle of January. This is the as predicted and, expected fallout of when you create mega conferences and you want to put 4 West Coast teams in the Big Ten. They are going to have to take more trips than everyone else that are longer, and so they have all of these East Coast swings. This was also the longest one for UCLA. Oh, by the way, having to go. They played at Nebraska, then they came back to play home against Michigan. Then they flew out to Maryland, and then they stuck around for 3 days. They played Rutgers, and then they flew overnight back to Los Angeles. So I do think the travel involved is an issue as well. Spoke to Cronin about that Friday night. I'll have his quotes in Wednesday's court report about that. He had some complaints to log, and at the same time, he does understand it's not exactly the easiest thing, but this is part of the deal when you want to, when presidents, athletic directors, and power brokers in college athletics want to create these huge conferences in the name of chasing football and football money. A lot of the other sports are going to pay the biggest brunt when it comes to traveling. And so that's not the only reason why, but it is another factor. They've dropped 5 of 6. They're not a top 25 team. They don't look like a top 45 team right now. And while they have good wins on the schedule, they're headed in the wrong direction. And it's not inconceivable they could miss the tournament. I don't think that'll happen, but they got to fix stuff, and they got to fix it quick.
Yeah, right now they're still safely in the NCAA tournament field. Before yesterday's game, they were an 8 seed in Jerry Palm's latest projected bracket. After last night's loss, they probably slipped, but still safely in the bracket, based off of good stuff they had done early in the season. But you got to flip it. And if you were a UCLA fan who was hoping that Mick's post game rant, for lack of a better word, was going to spark his team and flip the season the way in some ways Rick Pitino's rant flipped St. John's season last season. Maybe, but so far that has not happened. Fair to say they have not responded well to what their coach said. Yeah,
and Cronin, effectively a Pitino disciple, oh, by the way. And yeah, I mean, maybe they've responded. For all we know, they've responded well. Maybe the past 2 or 3 UCLA practices have been really, really good, and Cronin and the staff are much more satisfied with what's going on behind the scenes in practices, and it's not surfaced on the game. I can't speak to whether that has or hasn't happened, but this is a really good team, and it's the best, or we thought it was the best of the 4 on the West Coast in the Big Ten. That's not the case. Oregon is that team. In fact, I think Oregon has as many or nearly as many quad 1 wins as any team in the country so far this season. They're going to have to overcome it. They still have a road swing against Illinois and Indiana next month, and then they've got a Purdue Northwestern dip as February goes into March, and then they got to go back to the Midwest again to play in Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament. So it'll be interesting to see how the travel that's part of this is affecting them. But I will say this, it is swinging back in their favor here. UCLA gets 6 of its next 7 games now are in Los Angeles. The only road game, and they got to fly to Washington in a week and a half or so. And then the only other road game in that 7-game stretch is against USC. That's a bus ride to the intra-city rival there overall. But yeah, a bad one for UCLA, and then for Rutgers, a needed win to avoid going under 500. We've talked about this on the pod in recent episodes, but that program has been flailing. It's been a huge disappointment, and Dylan Harper did look way more like himself. He had a really nice night, and you hear Steve Peichel talk about it, and he was battling the flu, and that was something that carried over for well over a week. I heard Bill Raftery say on the broadcast on Monday night that apparently he lost close to 12 pounds, which, if true, is like insane. And he must have been really, really, really dealing with some pretty bad illness to drop, even if it was 7 or 8 pounds due to sickness. Parrish, that's drastic there. So coaches believe that sometimes the right win against the right opponent in the right spot really can turn your season. There's not really evidence of that with Rutgers so far this season, but we'll see if that can be the case, because they've got the talent up front. Now it's got to be the supporting cast of players around him. So one team had to win, one team had to lose, and UCLA's skid continues while Rutgers maybe finds a bright spot to turn things around in the second half of January.
Back to UCLA, not a conversation we would have thought we would be having just a couple of years ago, given that Mick Cronin had been to a Final Four and then back-to-back Sweet 16s, was operating at an extremely high level. But last season, they did miss the NCAA tournament and finished with a losing record. This season, who knows? But it's not going well right now. If they were to miss the NCAA tournament, does this get to be an uncomfortable conversation? Because That would be 2 missed NCAA tournaments in a row. And I don't know how much you know about the history of UCLA basketball, but they do not tolerate this type of stuff. Do you know how many times Ben Howland missed the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row at UCLA?
I'm going to say it happened 0 times.
0 times, and he still got fired. He got fired after winning a Pac-12 title. Like, he won the regular season Pac-12 title, lost in the opening round of the NCAA tournament, and they fired him. Steve Alford.
Yeah.
Trivia time. How many times do you think he missed the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row?
I'm going to say it happened 0 times.
0 times, and they still got him mid-season. They
did.
So
they did.
So they don't have much patience for this type of stuff. And I don't know. I'd be careful, because when the losses tend to stack up in Westwood, the people who have the money to create changes tend to want them. That's been the history of that program, at least.
I think there is a little bit of, even though the tenure has not been nearly as long, let me be clear about that. There's a little bit of UCLA fandom that is like Pittsburgh Steeler fandom, where, a lot of those people are ready to get rid of Mike Tomlin, even though they make the playoffs consistently. They haven't won a playoff game going back to 2016. It's why Ben Howland, that really did kind of equate to the Tomlin stuff. It's why Ben Howland got pushed out. It's why Steve Alford, among many other reasons. I happened to be talking to another coach in college basketball earlier this morning about this very thing, and they think it's certainly conceivable that if UCLA really goes the wrong way, and Cronin, to his own admission at his press conference a week ago, said, "I don't need to keep doing this." Like, so I do think that if they don't, I think they're going to make the tournament. Let me be clear. I think they're going to figure it out. But even if they make the tournament and they're Parrish 10 seed, don't beat the 7 in the first round, it's not inconceivable to me that we would see a change there. I'm not going to predict it's happening right now. I want to be clear about that. But Cronin, consistently vocal and critical, and is not afraid to tell it like how he sees it. There have been more unpredictable coaching changes in college basketball in the past year, let alone in recent history, than if there were to be a change at UCLA. But I think they're going to make the tournament, and I have faith that the program will get a little bit back on the steady and have a respectable seed once we get to March.
Yeah, I'm not predicting a coaching change either, but I understand the history of the UCLA program. I understand that coaches do not historically survive this type of stuff at UCLA. And I also understand that, Mick, as you put it, is not hesitant to say things the way he wants to say them, to explain things the way he sees them. But, it's never a good sign, or rarely a good sign, when you start publicly talking about you don't need this job, or you can find something else to do. You can go back decades and find a press conference where Nolan Richardson, one of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time with a national championship under his belt, was holding press conferences at Arkansas saying things like, if they want to fire me, they can fire me. And they said, okay, yeah, good. We'll do that then. You start daring your bosses or telling people you don't need this, there's somebody out there who might decide they want to take it from you. So just an interesting situation to monitor. Out in Westwood, UCLA, 4-game losing streak after being ranked top 15 in the AP poll as recently as 2 weeks ago. When we come back, we've mentioned Jerry Palm's updated bracket for the NCAA tournament several times already today. Let's dive into that next. He updated it yesterday. We'll tell you the top 4 seeds. We'll do that after the break. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. We have mentioned Jerry Palm's updated bracket several times throughout the show. Let's dive into it now. It's that time of the year, Norlander. Or let me ask, do you agree? Is it that time of the year? Is it too early to start looking at brackets? I don't think so.
I appreciate the question. I personally, I have a personal philosophy when it comes to this. I don't take stock in bracket forecasts until we get to February as a personal rule, only because so much can change between now and then. The bracketology creep can feel a little bit much. I like to focus on players, results, storylines. Because once we get into Valentine's Day, understandably so, bracket projections really take hold as they should. But GP, I'm more than happy to make some fun and talk some brackets here on this segment here, because you take a scan and you look at what he's got up at the site right now, and not only are you see all the SEC programs there, you start to get a look at like, okay, we've seen what these teams are doing, but if we did start the tournament today, what do we have here? Oh, Purdue, 4 seed, Michigan State, 3 seed, Houston. That's one of the best teams in KenPom, but it's down at a 7 line. So you see stuff like that in addition to the 1 seeds. And why don't you tell folks who Palm has on the 1 lines as of Tuesday afternoon?
Auburn, Iowa State, Duke, and Alabama are his 4 number 1 seeds. I think at this point, everybody would agree on Auburn, Iowa State, and Duke, as long as you're not factoring in Johni Broome's injury. Let me ask you this question. If the NCAA tournament were starting next week and Johni Broome were injured, would you seed line bump Auburn? Would you say, of course, that's the resume of a number 1 seed, but in the spirit of Kenyon Martin, we're taking Auburn and dropping them down to a 2 seed? Would that factor in?
Well, I've got to line edit you here. I believe you used the term seed line bump. Seed line bump is a move up. Seed line knock is the terminology for the move down.
My
it's a seed line knock.
My
it's okay. I would not.
Dumb terminology.
Well, listen. Without language, where are we? Okay. I would still have Auburn.
Probably better off, honestly.
Yeah, without the ability to communicate through words, we'd be better off.
I mean, not you and I personally, but I think as a society, maybe
as a species.
Yes.
Nothing like a little linguistic debate on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. What do you want from us? I think Auburn would still be a 1 seed. It might be knocked in the overall seed issue, but frankly, if we know this is the case, if Broome suffered that injury, call it in the SEC semis on a Saturday, the projection and messaging out of Auburn would have been like, we think we're getting him back Thursday in the first round. Come on, we know that's the case. So, but even if it was, say, it's undetermined, hopefully we get him back within 2 weeks, I think they would keep Auburn on the 1 line. I think Palm's 1 seeds are correct. Auburn, Iowa State, Bama, Duke. I don't have an issue with that. You can make a case for Tennessee, and I think you can make a case for Florida. I mentioned Oregon earlier. Oregon right now is a projected 2 seed from Palm, 7 quad 1 wins. That is indeed tied with Auburn for the most. Oregon has more losses. That's why it's projected a little bit further there. But the Ducks are kind of a sneaky bracket team right now. But I'm going with all the 1 seeds. I think they all stand up to scrutiny.
I'm fine with it. I would have it slightly different. I told Jerry this yesterday, I believe. I would have it Auburn, Iowa State, Duke, and Florida as opposed to Alabama. But I've got Alabama 5th in the top 25 and 1. So Alabama would be my top 2 seed instead of my worst 1 seed. We're really splitting hairs there. You mentioned Houston. Let's discuss them because it is an interesting situation that is developing. I've got Houston 21st in the top 25 and 1. They're 3rd in the net. So every morning, that's an exaggeration, not every morning, but some mornings, some Houston fan will remind me that I have Houston wildly underrated. And I might, from a computer perspective, I mean, I do from a computer perspective, from a point spread perspective. But as you know, I tried to rank teams in a similar way that the selection committee would rank teams, would seed teams. So when I see Jerry Palm take the same approach and put Houston as a 7 seed, that falls in line more with what I think Houston should be than what the computers suggest Houston is. Because the Cougars, we've been playing more than 2 months now. They're 0-3 in quadrant 1. They have 0 quadrant 1 wins. So this is a great basketball team, elite basketball team, legitimate national championship contender on paper, but they don't have any big wins yet. And they'll have plenty of opportunities in the Big 12. But on Selection Sunday, just having strong computer numbers is not going to be enough. There's a scenario where Houston could be top 10 at KenPom and not be seated anywhere close to what that suggests, the place you should be seated.
Houston's a program that has been the last standing team before taking its first loss in recent seasons. It's made a Final Four. It has been ranked near the top of every predictive metric that we've had over the past half decade. And so this is a little bit of an unusual spot for Houston to be in, because we've gotten to the second, we're just about into the third week of January, and the cake still very much needs to bake. Everything you laid out is completely correct. Houston's 3 losses are to its 3 best teams it's faced: Auburn, Alabama, and San Diego State. They were all close losses. 2 of them came in overtime, but they were losses all the same. And we will not get a Houston game of real note until Saturday, January 25th, when Houston plays at Kansas. That'll be a biggie. It's got that, and then West Virginia back to back. It will have the opportunities to get that. It's just going to take longer. Its resume is going to take longer to build out. And right now, there is a stark difference. Houston is number 1 in Torvik. It's third at KenPom. It's first in BPI, which is a team sheet metric. But in the resume-based metrics right now, KPI 31, strength of record 26, and wins above bubble, which is a new metric, which is a really good metric, is 35. So I don't have an issue with where Houston is slated by Palm right now. In fact, it's hard to find many that are too underseeded or too overseeded, because we're halfway through, so we need many more results. But among the most interesting resumes and teams and situations out there, right on the head, GP, I'd put Houston up there with the likes of a different kind of team. I'd say Dayton and what they might build out to be is going to be pretty fascinating. And then generally speaking, Duke is on the 1 line, but if Duke takes 1 or 2 bad losses in the ACC, if that even happens, I think they'll have an intriguing resume case on whether or not they should be a 1 once we get to March.
One more segment to go before we get out of here. We'll take a quick look at Tuesday night's schedule. We got a triple header on CBS Sports Network, headlined by number 7 Marquette at DePaul. We'll get into that next. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Tuesdays are always a fun day in the sport. This Tuesday, no exception. We got Inside College Basketball coming up, CBS Sports Network, 6:30 Eastern. Brent Stover will be hosting. I'll be in studio with Wally Zerbiak, Roy Hibbert, a couple of former NBA All-Stars. Then at 7 o'clock, number 7 Marquette at DePaul. At 9 o'clock, Texas Tech at Kansas State. At 11 o'clock, Colorado State and San Diego State. Fun triple header, Norlander. What are you looking forward to tonight?
Hey, that's a really, really good triple header, by the way, on CBS Sports Network. I got this hunch DePaul might be making it a game, but I do like Marquette to win. You'll obviously be in studio. By the way, I'll be on CBS Sports HQ with multiple updates throughout the night as well. So we got you covered in addition to the Monday wrap-up show, as usual, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. A ton of games. The couple that just stick out to me real quick here, GP. Arkansas at LSU. This is a road game. We talked about Calipari on the Sunday episode. That is a tough spot, and it is super urgent. That's a 9 o'clock tip. I got my eyes on that. In addition to what we mentioned earlier, Mississippi State, Auburn, obviously going to be watching that. Texas A&M at Kentucky. Wade Taylor IV is still out. We don't know the nature of his lower body injury, and we don't know when he's going to return. It's kind of the exact opposite of the Broome situation, where there's been much more transparency. Not the case whatsoever with Buzz Williams' program there. Can Kentucky keep going? But the game I have my eyes on, it's 2 teams coming off losses, and it's not in the SEC. It's in the Big Ten. Illinois is at Indiana now. Indiana just got smoked by Iowa, 25-point loss. Meantime, Illinois coming off a surprising loss at home to USC with no Kasparas Yakachonis, who's been one of the 3 or 4 best freshmen in the country. That's a really good 7 o'clock Eastern tip in the Big Ten. And the losing team and the attached fan base there will have understandable reason to have some gripping going on. Because if IU loses at home, and particularly we don't know if Yakachonis is going to play or not, that'll be urgent. If Illinois can't win on the road, a little more understandable, but that's a team that's been looking really good and is yet to face kind of back-to-back instances of some serious issues. Illinois has not yet lost 2 in a row. It ranks as a top 15 team. So my most intriguing game of the night is going down in Bloomington.
Yeah, the SEC schedule is loaded. That's obviously an interesting Big Ten matchup. Circling back to the Big East, Marquette at DePaul. I led the top 25-1 on Tuesday morning because there were no relevant games to the top 25-1 on Monday night. On Marquette's Cam Jones, my little homie from Memphis, who has just been terrific. And sort of the way I framed it is, yeah, it does feel like the National Player of the Year race is a 2-man race. And if I were betting, I would bet it becomes a 1-man race before it becomes a 3-person race, with Cooper Flagg running away with it. But if you are looking for an alternative candidate, Cam Jones can be that guy. Sub 100 recruit coming out of high school. a role player as a freshman, has emerged as a star, would be the favorite right now to be Big East Player of the Year, would probably be a first-team All-American according to most at this point, and has a chance to play in the NBA as well. So if you want to put your eyes on him, 7 o'clock Eastern, CBS Sports Network tonight, number 7 Marquette at DePaul. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle. He's a legend. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. We'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Same time, same place.